Good evening. Welcome to Europe Vision News. Due to a very low voter participation at the last election for the European Parliament this week decided to introduce an obligation to vote in all countries that belong to the European Union, to provide that the election really represents the will of the masses. They decided to introduce this because it was shown successful in former times, for example in Belgium and in Greece. Last night, the European Parliament adopted the new traffic agreement. In the last years, the strain of the infrastructure increased strongly, especially in weak regions in Europe. Now the European Parliament decided to act. This traffic agreement comprises huge investments in the infrastructure of weak regions. Now we connect to a live correspondent in Brussels. Good evening to Brussels.
Good evening. The agreement was to be decided on for a long time, but early in the morning, the politicians finally came to a conclusion. The most important point of the contract is investing in the infrastructure of structurally weak European regions. One aspect is to improve the infrastructure of the European railway system and make sure traveling in Europe gets easier. Also, safe and convenient traveling via railway should be ensured. But the contract does not talk about the funding of the project and how much money every country has to spend. So possibly the EU is going to face some opposition when it comes to paying the price for this contract. That's it from me, now back to the studio.
The effects of the prohibition of entering a country in the European states is increasingly noticeable. In the refugee encampments on the island Lampedusa and on Cyprus, the situation is constantly worsening, since many thousands of refugees are held up in small camps for more than a week waiting for the permission to enter Europe. The European states nearby Italy, Greece and Turkey decided to reintroduce border controls for personal traffic, since the amount of refugees in the encampments keeps rising constantly. The refugees in the camps started demonstrating a few weeks ago due to the deteriorating standards in the camps. Problems exist even with food, water and medical supplies. Commenting on the circumstances, a speaker of the human rights organization United Europe gives his critical opinion.
The increasing number of refugees in the encampments of Lampedusa is caused by the introduction of border controls for refugees. Basically, this is a violation of human rights. The circumstances will continue to get worse in the future until waves of diseases and violence rain down upon Europe, if the governments responsible will not change anything in the near future. We hope the EU will show its support concerning supplies and voluntary doctor organizations.
The Interior Ministry of the countries concerned state that the amount of refugees already is far above their capacity. The decision to introduce stricter border controls within the EU only protects the already strained social politics and the job market. In some European cities, people have expressed their opinions, for example in Wien. People approving of the new politics and people objecting to it went on the streets to demonstrate. Fortunately, there has not been any violence between the two sides yet. The representative Dominic Otto of the German Bundestag complained about the latest changes in the Schengen Agreement. He criticized the fact that at many borders between Schengen member states, border controls have been reintroduced for personal traffic.
Basically I think the purpose of the agreement is well meant. The problem is that as of today the agreement does not serve its purpose. Even though every single Schengen state has signed a contract, and a very small amount is even trying to stick to the agreement. So many states let refugees invade their countries because they know they won't stay there for very long. This means they abuse the Schengen agreement to get rid of the unwanted in their country. They just act according to their own interests, not considering the consequences. As a result of this development, border controls have been established, even within the Schengen states. This makes me wonder why the Schengen Agreement even still exists. In my opinion, border controls should be abolished, since free movement within Europe. and the Schengen Agreement as a sign of unity and freedom should be re-established the way it was meant to be.
In June 2013, after France had closed its border to Italy, in fear of a wave of immigrants which landed on Lampedusa, an agreement was made that Schengen member states can reactivate the border controls in case any Schengen border state neglects its duty in border control. These border controls have to pass the Council of the European Union. Since 2020, many states decided to reintroduce border controls due to the rising number of refugees. These states fear the rising number of illegal immigrants crossing the borders of Greece, Italy and Turkey. Since the border states cannot stop these immigrants, the other states will not open their borders again. For this reason, traveling between many Schengen states today requires a passport again. If his appeal will remain without effect, Dominic Otto announced that he might sue in the European Court of Justice to fight for the original idea of Europe without borders. Anyway, this week is going to be the 10-year anniversary of Serbia's entry in the EU. Our Balkan correspondent, Ruben Harten, gives an overview.
Good evening, Europe. 10 years ago, Serbia became a member state of the European Union. 2019, 1 year before, Serbia acknowledged Kosovo as an independent state. With the admission of Kosovo, the last barrier for the entry of Serbia in the EU has been eliminated. As a result of the negotiations, the politicians realized that the EU should adapt to different cultures and people to achieve an improvement in integration of all member states. Both the Serbian people and the Serbian politicians in retrospect evaluate the membership as a huge success, even though there still are some unresolved issues, especially the structural differences between the member states. Because of that, the European Parliament decided that structurally weak candidate countries shall be supported optimally. Due to that, EU membership of the more and more evolving Kosovo gets more probable. Back to the studio with Sven Brauer.
In spring 2016, genetically modified food imported from America attracted the attention of the court. As a result of this, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP in short, was introduced. Due to the new restrictions in 2028 by the German government, there were protests in the agricultural industry in the USA. An American company specialized on genetically modified plants complains about losses worth $1.5 billion and demanded that Germany will pay at least part of its losses as compensation. The exact amount of money demanded has not been announced to the public yet, but experts anticipate a claim of several millions of dollars. On another matter, the climate goal that was proclaimed by EU representatives 15 years ago in 2015 has already been achieved. The EU committed to increasing its proportion of renewable energy consumption to 35% in total. The proportion in 2029 was 39%, so it was already 4 percentage points higher than aimed at. Also, the greenhouse gas emissions decreased by 40% in comparison to 1990.
Windwheels nowadays belong to our European characteristic landscape. More than 40% of the renewable energy is produced by windwheels. Furthermore, social acceptance of renewable energy has risen continuously. 80% of Europeans have a positive impression of wind energy. The minimum distance of 1.2 kilometers to the residential zones introduced 5 years ago contributed to this. According to the European Commission, also technical, in all types of renewable energy, wind energy, hydrodynamic power, photovoltaics, biofuel and biogas and geothermal energy supported the positive development. Although energy prices have risen considerably, mostly people accept the increase because they want to preserve for our environment.
The industry of mobile phones is having big problems at the moment, because silicon becomes very rare. Still, the demand increases, because it is not only a component of electronic devices, but also the solar plant industry is affected by this problem. Unfortunately for the industry, Greenpeace wants to close the last open cut mines to save nature, because the quarrying turned big parts of the African landscape into a moonscape. But now, some scientists of the University of Kiel found a solution against the scarcity of raw materials. They finally invented a system to recycle 90% of the materials mentioned from scrap. Fujitsu and other European companies proclaimed a huge interest. That's it from Europe Vision News. See you next week with the latest news on Europe. Good night and enjoy the following movie.